It's a privilege for me to be here. I look forward to making this interactive, and we'll open up questions. If I say something that somebody wants to stop me, I'm fine with that as well. Tom did say, well, first of all, let me say, great basketball victory the other night, okay? Okay? I only have one request, though, okay? That you do it to Utah as well coming up, okay? So keep that in mind. I grew up here in Provo. I imagine most of the students here are from the state of Utah, being a state school. And I grew up here in Provo and live in Centerville right now. And so in a lot of ways was like you a number of years ago, too many years ago, I guess. I graduated in accounting from BYU, went on to get an MBA from the University of Utah, and then went into public accounting where I met Tom. And then I've been with R.C. Willey for about 30 years as their controller, CFO, and CEO for the last 15. Let me tell you a little bit about R.C. Willey to begin with, and then I'm going to tell you some stories about things not to do in business. Sometimes you probably go to school and they hear about things you ought to do in business. I'm going to tell you some things not to do in business. Our company has been around for about 85 years. Started in Syracuse, Utah, which is a small farming community up by a little north of Lagoon. I find people down here don't know much about anything past Salt Lake. And company grew a little bit and had their second store back in the early 70s. And a third store back in the 1980s. This was all Utah-based. And R.C. started his business. There was a guy named R.C. Willey, actually, a guy named R.C. Willey. His name was Rufus Call, and maybe that's why he went by R.C. He started selling appliances out of the back of his truck, okay, back in the 30s. And he used to, if you lived in the 30s and you didn't have a refrigerator, he sold ice boxes. And he started the first credit program out there. He said, you try this ice box, and if you don't like it, I'll take it back. Well, can you imagine not having refrigeration and then you get an ice box? He never had to take one back. And so that's how the company started. We grew a little bit. 1991 was an important year for us. We built a distribution center and we moved down here to Utah County. We carry appliances, we carry furniture, we carry electronics, we carry flooring, we carry mattresses. And in 1995, we sold our company, as Tom mentioned, to Berkshire Hathaway, which is a very large company, and they're a holding company. Warren Buffett is the director of that, and so we've been running that for about 21 years now under their a subsidiary of a public company. They have about 70 subsidiaries and own a lot of companies, stock in a lot of companies, but they really run it like a small business as well. And it's been a good thing for our company, it's been a good thing for our customers, and been a good thing for Berkshire as well, although we're very small compared to where they are. We finished revenues last year of just over $750 million, and a lot of people don't realize we do more business outside the state of Utah than we do inside the state of Utah. So we have operations in Nevada, Idaho, and California as well. And Berkshire has probably 70 subsidiaries, and last year I think their revenues were over $200 billion. So that tells you how big we are in the scheme of things to Berkshire. But it's been a great marriage for us and our team. Now, one of the things when we meet with the other CEOs of Berkshire, we talk about and are ingrained in us what we call the ABCs of business failure, okay? And those are some things that we never want to find in our organization, because once that starts to happen, you become at risk. And I don't care if it's a small company, a medium-sized company, or a large company, be careful of these when you start a business, okay? When you're working in a business. And the ABCs to be careful of are arrogance, bureaucracy, and complacency, okay? Now let me give you a couple of stories. The culture of Berkshire is something that well, people ask me what my job is, and as far as my company is, my job is really twofold. It's about the culture of our company, and it's about the vision of our company, okay? And so when I talk about arrogance, if that starts to creep in your business, no matter how small it is, at some point, you're going to find some challenges out there. I learned that in the culture of Berkshire, it doesn't exist, okay? And we had a luncheon with all the CEOs at one point, and I sat next to a guy named Don Keel. Has anybody ever heard of Don Keel? Okay, you're all too young to know Don Keel. Don's passed away, and he was on the Berkshire board, and I sat next to him just at a luncheon, and he was not only on the Berkshire board, but he used to be the former chairman of Coca-Cola. Okay? Berkshire's a big investor of Coca-Cola. In fact, they own, I think, about 12% of it. Warren says every 12th can of Coke is his at this point. So, but Don sat next to me, and I was a young CEO at the time, and I was a little intimidated. And I'll never forget the luncheon because Don Keel, I thought, he was so kind, he was so nice, and all he did was ask me questions about me, my family, our business, when in reality, he could have talked an awful lot about himself, what he had accomplished, what he had done, but I saw, here's a guy who is genuinely concerned, is a good listener, and I thought, we will never have a culture problem here at Berkshire with this kind of thing happening, okay? Bureaucracy. What do you think I mean by bureaucracy?
Political.
Okay, political. What kind of bureaucracy can exist in a company?
It's when the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing.
Okay. Any other ideas? I'm going to go out and say part of it is when there's too many right hands and too many left hands. Okay? That there are too many people in an organization, and as soon as you hire somebody, they need two assistants who then need another assistant, and be careful about your overhead and the bureaucracy that exists. Make your decision-making process fairly easy. Berkshire, $200 billion company, has 23 employees, okay, at corporate headquarters. Okay, now you think about that. Now, they got a lot of employees. They got hundreds of thousands of employees in their subsidiaries, and they run their companies, but the culture is to stay away from that. I remember right after being purchased by Berkshire, we thought, they're into insurance companies as well, and I thought it was important that we run our liability insurance policies past them to see if that's what they wanted. And I remember calling the CFO and saying, okay, this is what we're doing. What kind of limits do you want as far as what we should carry on our policy? Now you think about asking somebody of that stature a question, okay? Most people at that level would give you an answer. And I'll never forget that his reply was, we don't make that decision at Berkshire, you make that decision. You run your company like you've always run it, and we're going to stay out of your way. Okay? Now, that culture exists. We try and do that within our own organization to make sure that we don't overhire. Okay? There will always be some rough times out there, and letting people go is not a fun thing to do. okay? I'd be slow to hire, so I learned a lot that day to say, make sure you don't have the bureaucracy. We have a board, okay? We have 4 people on our board, okay? And 3 of us are day to day, and we have 1 board meeting a year. That's very different in the world today, but that's how we operate to try and keep it simple and keep bureaucracy. The other thing is complacency. What does complacency mean? Yeah, okay. One of the things I think you've got to continue to work on, no matter what company you're at, is to say never be satisfied with the status quo where you're at. And that's hard. And that's a culture thing as well. Be careful of mediocrity, okay? Everybody should try and get a little bit better. I know I do a self-assessment every year, okay? At the end of the year, it's coming up, and I'll say, how can I be a better CEO? How can I be a better husband? How can I be a better father? Now I've got to say, how can I be a better grandfather? Okay? How do I continue to develop myself personally? And so be careful of complacency, not only within yourself, but your organization that you might be involved with. So those are some things to think about. One of the things that we also do that I'll caution you on is be careful about, or understand the difference between short-term versus long-term. Okay? How does short-term versus long-term apply in a business?
It's relevant.
What's that?
It's very relevant.
Very-
Every day you have short-term goals to get finished and accomplished, and then, like you were saying, at the end of the year, maybe at the beginning of the year to the end, you have that long-term goal too.
Okay. Be careful about decisions that are correct for the short term but wrong for the long term. Okay? The charge that I've been given by my boss is to run our company as if it is the only family asset that we have, and it's the only asset that we'll have for the next 50 years. Now, if you're given that charge, that's very different than trying to make this quarter's earnings or this quarter's revenue. Okay? So we try and be long-term oriented to say what's the best thing to last in the company long-term. And if you look at Wall Street and you read Wall Street, they talk a lot about next quarter's earnings and the guidance they give. Okay? You'll never see Berkshire Hathaway give any guidance with regard to revenue next year or income next year. Okay? Why do you think they wouldn't give guidance on that?
They don't learn how to govern themselves.
What do you mean by that?
They don't know how to plan, set a vision, set a mission for themselves, and instead they just turn to you and say, do it for us.
Well, I think they're pretty well planned on what they're doing, okay? But the culture is, if you tell somebody what you're going to do in the next quarter or the next 6 months with regard to revenues or income, there becomes a propensity in the company to make sure that happens. Okay? And accountants can do a lot of funny things with numbers. We have never had to, the company has never had to tell Berkshire what we're going to do for the next quarter or for the next year. We run our company as if it's the only asset we have for the next 50 years. Okay? Now, I do have to write a letter once a month, just kind of telling him how things are, but at the same time, we're not there to try and manipulate a stock price. We're there just to run our business and take care of our customers. Short-term versus long-term is important. Now, my other short-term, long-term story that's important with regard to customers and arrogance was when I was sitting with Don Keogh at lunch. And Don had been the chairman of Coca-Cola. And he started telling me this story. He said, we were talking about taking care of the customer, that retail's a hard business. We don't invent anything. We open our doors every day and have to take care of every customer that comes in. And he told me that for years, Coca-Cola never had the Wendy's account. Okay? Wendy's pretty big fast food chain, right, over the years. He said, let me tell you what happened. Do you want to know why that is that Coca-Cola never had the Wendy's account? Okay? There was a guy named Dave Thomas, but had an idea to start a hamburger franchise, okay, years ago. And he was starting out, okay, much like back then, I'm sure some of these ideas that came up today. And he went to the Coke rep, okay, the distributor, and asked if they could carry Coke. The Coke rep then went on to tell him, gave him a reason why he couldn't. Either it was through a pricing mechanism or made him feel, and this was his direct quote, "You will never succeed in the hamburger business unless you have Coke in your store." Okay? So Don Keogh went to meet with Dave Thomas. This is years later, and Wendy's, and they still are running Pepsi through their whole place. And Dave told him that story, and he said, Don, I'm still trying to prove that guy wrong, that I can make a hamburger joint work without Coke in my store. Now, you think about that for a minute, and you think about the comment, the arrogance that rep had to make. Just be careful what you say and think long-term, not short-term. I'm sure the guy who made that comment was thinking short-term, not long-term, and where this could have been. Now, a couple other things that we like to focus on is understanding the difference between a transaction and an experience. This is what we do in retail, but I think in any business that you deal with, you have to think about a transaction versus an experience. What's a transaction? What comes to your mind?
Buy something.
You buy something, okay? What else? Exchange of money. Okay, you get something for some money. What's an experience?
Emotional.
Okay, it's emotional. Something you'll remember. Okay? In our company, we try and say we are there to try and create positive experiences for our customers. Okay, and that's what we teach our associates. And probably by the time you buy something from us, you will have dealt with 7 or 8 different associates, from a salesperson to a cashier to some delivery drivers, different people, and every one of them are trying to create a positive customer experience. I was talking to some associates one time, and they said, somebody said, a transaction is something I get at 7-Eleven when I go get my coffee in the morning. And somebody raised their hand and said, not at my 7-Eleven. At my 7-Eleven, getting my cup of coffee in the morning is an experience. Okay, now think about that. Doesn't get much basic than something for money going in there. And I said, what makes the difference between a transaction experience and getting your coffee in the morning? And he said, when I walk in there, the person knows my name. They ask me how I'm doing. They talk to me about my kids. It's an emotional thing, and I look forward to going in there every day, not just for the coffee, but for the personal interaction that takes place. Okay? So that's something that we try and do as well, is to make sure we're ingrained in that. The other thing I would counsel you on as far as your businesses go is understand the difference between a guideline and a policy. What's a policy? Black and white. This is the way it is, right? Okay. What's a guideline? Suggestions. Okay. In our company, one of the things that we try and do is we try and teach our people that we have guidelines, not policies. And ask yourself the question when you interact with the different companies, does this company have a guideline or a policy? Now, we need guidelines to make sure that we're all trying to work on the same page, that what the cashier's telling the person is what the delivery person's going to do is actually in the same ballpark, okay? But every customer's a little bit different. And so we want to make sure that we have policies, or guidelines, not policies. The only policies that we really have are what the government institutes on us. Okay? We have some payroll policies. We've got some things that we got to do to make sure we stay in line with the law. But don't get too rigid on your policy. Okay? If you're having a problem with a customer as you start a business or start your job, listen to them and see if you can solve their problem. Don't tell them what your policy is. If you have to explain to somebody what your organizational chart is in answering a customer, you're going to have problems. Well, the customer service person said that we can only do this, or my boss said this, or somebody at that location said that. Listen to them and try and solve their problems. And that's tough, because some people out there like to be black and white, right? It's easy. Managing is easy if you can be black and white. Okay? The same way with associates. I use the example, if I have 3 sales associates and they report to the same sales manager, and one is a college student like you, one is a single mother of age 35 and has 2 kids in elementary school, and one is a grandmother, do they have different needs? Sure they do. But sometimes as a manager, we think the easiest thing to do is say, this is the policy, this is black and white, this is what we do, because it's easy to manage that way. In reality, we want to reach out to the one and say, how can I accommodate your needs? Somebody that's your age better have a Friday or Saturday night off, because they probably have some social needs, okay? A single mother probably needs to have some time off in the middle of the day to go to the Halloween carnival that her kids are in at school. And the grandmother probably does whatever grandmothers do, okay? So think about that. And look at organizations and say, how rigid are they? At the same time, we find that the best thing for associates is you treat them like a human being, listen to them, and try and meet their needs, just like we would with our customers. Okay, another story. I had an experience 3 or 4 years ago that taught me a lot about business and a lot about life. I was invited to go down to a BYU game at Ole Miss. Okay, anybody familiar with Ole Miss? Anybody from that area? What's that? SEC. Okay, but Ole Miss is a college town, and they do some tailgating before the game where there is more tailgating. People go more to the tailgating more than to the game. Okay? It's huge. It's big. And so I had a friend down there. His name's Eddie. And he runs an appliance. He runs the big appliance and electronics store in Mississippi. And he invited me down to the game. And went with my wife and took my two boys, and there was some real southern hospitality there. And Eddie, we went to this, the tailgating party, and over the course of the weekend, probably introduced me to 100 different people. Okay? And every time he introduced me to somebody, he came up and he said, like I am to Megan here, he said, Scott, let me introduce you to one of my best friends, one of my really, truly best friends, Megan. Okay? He did that 2 or 3 times. The first 2 or 3 times I thought, whoa, what a coincidence. I've run into his best friends right off the bat. And I know Eddie. I've known Eddie for a long time. Very friendly guy. But then as it kept going on, I'd look in the eyes of these people, and I could tell that every one of them truly felt like they were Eddie's best friend by the way he treated them. Saturday afternoon, he introduced me to a senator, not a state senator. I think it was Trent Lott. Was he from Mississippi? Anybody remember that? Yeah. Okay. And as one of his best friends. Okay? 10 minutes later, I'm riding up the elevator with Eddie to go to the game at his suite up there. And there's somebody operating the elevator. Okay? An Ole Miss student. Okay? And he introduced me to her. Okay? And she was African American, and I know the South has a little reputation for some challenges but he introduced me, right after he introduced me to the senator, to one of his best friends who was running the elevator, who was a student at Ole Miss, who was African American. And then we got out of there, and he said, hey, just wait for me right here. I'm going to go get her a hot dog and a drink so she has a great day. Now, this is a successful guy. This is a down-to-earth guy. He's got his own businesses there in Mississippi. And so at the end of the day, I said to him, or end of the weekend, I said, Eddie, how do you do it? I've been around a lot of people, and I've never seen anybody handle people like Eddie did. I said, everybody's your best friend, everybody loves you. And he says, I have 2 rules that I live by. Okay? And I want you to write these down, and I want you to test me on it. Okay? The first one is pretty simple. He says, rule number 1, don't be a jerk. Okay, now think about that, though. Okay? Anybody know a jerk? Okay, we all do, right? Okay? Don't be a jerk. He said the second rule, and the rule that's probably more important, is I call people when I don't need anything. Okay, now think about that for a second. I call people when I don't need anything. Most of the time when we call somebody, and your generation does a lot less calling than my generation, okay? He'll pick up the phone, make a list of people, and call them and just say, how are you doing? Okay? Now, I want to give you the challenge today to try me on that one. Because I think it'll change your life. Okay? And I think it will change the life. I guarantee you have some family members that you haven't talked to for a while. Everybody got that? Okay? You've got some old friends that you haven't talked to. You know somebody who... What's that? There's only two. Only two. Don't be a jerk and call people when I don't need anything. But I promise you it'll change your life. If you call somebody up and just say, hey, I've just been thinking about you. How you doing? How's your family? Okay? If you're in the company. Okay? I was in Las Vegas the other day and challenged some of our management team to do that. We do employee surveys, and I said, I want to give you a challenge for the next 60 days that you call 3 people every day where you don't need anything. I don't care if it's family, I don't care if it's somebody in a different department, I don't care if it's somebody that you reach out. I got an email last night from one of the managers that said, thanks for giving me the ability to reach out to somebody. Okay? It made a difference not only in my life, but in their life. Okay? I want to give you the charge to do that. Think about somebody that you haven't called and that you don't need anything. Okay? Day before Thanksgiving, I get a phone call. Who's the phone call from? Eddie. Just thinking about you, Scott. Want to make sure you and your family have a nice Thanksgiving, and just thinking about you. Now, here's a guy who's going into Black Friday. He's business, but on Wednesday, he's reaching out to somebody to say, hope you have a good Black Friday. Hope you have a good holiday with your family. So, treat people the way you want to be treated. Look for an organization that does that. Work hard. And you'll be successful. Okay? Getting a great education down here, that's part of it. But working hard is part of it as well. So, with that, we got about 9 minutes left, I'm told. Let me open it up to any questions that I've talked about or things I haven't talked about that somebody might have.
Okay, who's got questions?
Great.
So,
Yeah, it was on.
so you talk about having the experience versus having a transaction. And when you talk about, small goods like a cup of coffee, that's not really a big issue. People come back in Tuesday through Thursday, Monday through Friday, whatever, to get their cup of coffee. When people come in to buy a sofa, that's not really something you come in to do on Monday and then do again on Tuesday and then do again on, Wednesday. So how do you have that experience inside of a furniture store instead of a more stable goods retail environment?
All right, let me give you some things for different associates. First of all, we have a greeter there that greets them and says hello to them when they come in. Okay? We have a salesperson there that what we teach them is to listen to what their needs are, rather than just start talking about furniture or appliances or whatever. There's a reason that person's there, and we need to understand why they're there. Okay? Then we try and give them different options, explain to them what the differences are between the different sofas. We've got a wide range of different product. Then we talk to the greeter or the cashier who may take the money. And, this is something that I talk to cashiers about is there a difference between when they give them their receipt saying, there you go, versus, thank you, Mrs. Jones. We appreciate your business. Okay? I'll go meet with the drivers that will deliver the product, and I want to give them the challenge to say, when you get done, I want you to look them right in the eye, shake their hand, and say, thanks for allowing us to deliver your product here today. And by the way, I think your furniture looks great in your home. Now, those are small things. Does it happen every time? No, I'm not naive enough to think it happens every time. But a year ago, I went on delivery. I go on delivery every year. where I just show up at the warehouse and in my Levi's and I go on deliveries. And I went and we had 18 stops that day. 16 of those stops were with repeat customers. The other 2 were from people that were out of state that had been told by customers at Hill Air Force Base that if you want furniture, that's where you go, because they'll take care of you. Okay? So those are little things. It makes a difference to say it isn't about a cup of coffee. They'll remember that next time. And they may not buy furniture for another 3 or 4 or 5 years, but they'll probably need an appliance or a mattress or some flooring. So, question?
So you may have already mentioned this, but what was your educational background and how has that influenced you in business?
My educational background was, high school. I was Dixon Junior High in Provo. I went to Provo High for 1 year and then graduated from Timpview. Then I went to BYU. I graduated in accounting, which I think everybody needs to know a little bit of accounting. It's the language of business, okay? And whether you're an accounting major or not, I'm not saying you have to do that, but don't be afraid of an accounting class to try and get an understanding of how to read a financial statement or how to understand a debit or a credit. Okay, I think that's important. Then I went on, did an internship in public accounting, went on to the University of Utah and got an MBA. So it was a little bit different. Then I went and my first job out of school was in public accounting.
So kind of piggybacking on that, besides being a really good accountant, what are some of those qualities and characteristics that helped you become a CEO from beginning in public accounting?
I think one of the things that wasn't afraid to work, okay? I think that's underrated in today's world, okay? So I put in some hours. I think one of the main differences that I did, we'd just been bought by Berkshire Hathaway, and we had some debt at the time, and I had worked with a banker to put together a different structure, a financing structure, okay? And I went back, and it was a commercial paper program, which is really a way that Berkshire could borrow money cheaper than borrowing it from a bank, okay? And so I put that together for our company, and it was eventually taken by Berkshire. And I think one of the things that happened was, Warren saw that had some ingenuity or whatever. So anyway, when our chairman stepped down, who had been running it, I'm not sure how I was selected. I think probably the former CEO and Warren had a discussion, and I took the job.
My question's about culture, and all the classes I've taken here, it's one of the things that they say is hard to change, the resistance from the people. What's some methods that you get your employees, or so when we're doing like consulting work and we're trying to get the company to change their culture, because we see it's a culture thing, but there's a huge resistance from their employees, or some things that you can get over those kind of humps?
Well, there's a term out there in business that known as silos, okay? And within an organization, there are a lot of different silos. That could be a location, it could be a department, and one of the things that we try and teach is trying knocking down those silos. And I think sometimes it doesn't start it starts at the vice president level. If you got one vice president that doesn't get along with another one, then that's a challenge. And I think one of the things that you got to work on is that group of leadership, okay, is an important thing. I'll give a plug too. Of all the things that we've done in our company, there's a group out of BYU who, I don't know if they're professors or what, called Crucial Conversations. You heard of that? we run all our managers through this thing called crucial conversations. It's how to have a tough conversation with somebody in the organization. And that's been a big thing for us. So you got to work at it, culture, and you're going to have one person that's a challenge, and that's when you got to sit them down and say, listen, this is a problem. And sometimes they don't even know they're doing it. But culture is something that you got to continue to work on year after year, day after day. Okay?
Okay, just before we wrap it up, don't forget next week is our last speaker. I want to tell you, though, when Tom and I sat down to plan out the semester, we thought about different stages of company. Our objective was to give you some perspectives into different stages, different industries, different professions within the entrepreneurship realm. And we were really excited that Scott was willing to come and speak, because this is probably a fantastic success story of a family business that started and grew over multi-generations, got to a point where they continue to maintain a culture, continue to maintain a service, expanded with multiple locations, and had a transaction exit with Berkshire Hathaway, and continues to have that culture in place. That's a rare story, and Scott has got some fantastic experience here he shared with you. I really enjoyed every aspect that you
Let me say one thing about my skill set would not be an entrepreneur. I think I understand that, okay? We had an entrepreneur who took it for the first, after RC, his name was Bill Child, and he was an entrepreneur that took it, okay? But I understand what my limitations were, and I'm not an entrepreneur. In fact, one of the things I got to keep doing is pushing myself and pushing others to keep that entrepreneurial spirit in the company.
Yeah, but it's one of the challenges you face when your company gets this large. How do you keep that together? So we really appreciate Scott. Let's for coming. Thank you very much.